Welcome to This Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to be your guide today. If you really want to understand the modern American presidency, the sheer power of the executive branch, the intense populist rhetoric, those fiercely partisan campaigns, you simply have to understand the turbulent, deeply complex life of its seventh president. Today, we're putting on our political biographer hats to examine Andrew Jackson. We're going to treat this as an investigation, kind of a psychological autopsy, really, into how one man's deep-seated trauma and personal grievances literally rewrote the political landscape of an entire nation. We're looking at Jackson through the lens of character as destiny.
Okay, let's dive into this, because here is the central tension that has absolutely obsessed historians for 2 centuries. Was Andrew Jackson the ultimate champion of the common man, this total outsider who smashed a corrupt aristocratic system? Or was he an incipient tyrant, a man so convinced of his own righteousness that he essentially acted as America's first dictator? To answer that, we can't just look at his time in the White House. We've got to go back to the very beginning.
Section 1. The Frontier Orphan.
To get why his political ideology was so fierce, we first have to understand his youth. Jackson's worldview wasn't born in a cozy debating society or some elite university. It was forged in the profound, unimaginable traumas of the American frontier and the Revolutionary War. In 1767, he's born in the rugged Waxhaw settlement. By 1781, as just a young boy in the Revolution, he gets captured by the British. A British officer actually slashes him with a sword just for refusing to clean his boots. While imprisoned, he and his brother contract smallpox, and tragically, his brother dies. Shortly after that, his mother dies of illness while trying to rescue other American prisoners. So by the age of 15, Jackson had lost his entire immediate family. He was an orphan. This left him a scarred, hardened survivor with a lifelong burning hatred for the British and a total reliance on his own fierce independence. By 1788, he heads west to the wild frontier town of Nashville to make his own way.
That rough frontier life, it cultivated a prickly, honestly almost dangerous sense of personal honor. This is best illustrated by the wild fact that he carried an enemy's bullet in his chest for the rest of his life. In 1806, after a dispute that started over a horse race, of all things, and escalated into insults against his wife, Jackson faced Charles Dickinson in a pistol duel. Now, Dickinson was a crack shot. He fired first, hitting Jackson square in the chest. Jackson didn't even flinch. He coolly stood his ground, took careful aim, and killed Dickinson. That bullet stayed lodged near his heart forever. It's a crazy story, but it brilliantly illustrates his unyielding temperament. When Andrew Jackson felt his honor was slighted, he never backed down, no matter the personal cost.
Section 2. Hero of New Orleans. Now, what's really interesting about this is how those deep personal grievances and his intense desire for action eventually found a massive national stage. Just consider the sheer, staggering magnitude of the casualty ratio at the Battle of New Orleans in January 1815. 2,000 British casualties compared to just 71 Americans. Jackson led this ragtag, heavily outnumbered force of frontiersmen, militia, free black men, and even pirates against hardened British veterans, and he completely decimated them.
But here is the ultimate irony of that legendary battle. It was fought 2 weeks after the peace treaty was signed. Militarily, the battle didn't alter the outcome of the War of 1812 at all. But psychologically, it changed everything. It gave a fledgling United States a massive injection of national pride, and instantly transformed Andrew Jackson into America's greatest military hero since George Washington. Overnight, he wasn't just a general anymore, he was a living myth.
Section 3. The Corrupt Bargain.
So that military fame propels him directly into the chaotic presidential race of 1824. It was a 4-way splintering of the old Democratic-Republican Party. Jackson clearly led both the popular vote and the electoral vote. But because no single candidate secured an absolute majority of electoral votes, the Constitution dictated that the decision go to the House of Representatives.
In the House, Speaker Henry Clay, who had come in fourth and was out of the running, threw his considerable influence right behind John Quincy Adams. Adams wins and immediately names Clay his Secretary of State. Jackson was absolutely furious. He declared that a corrupt bargain had swindled him out of the presidency. Now, whether it was actually a secret backroom deal or just aligned political interests, to Jackson it was undeniable proof that an arrogant, insider elite was actively conspiring against the will of the people. This fueled a lifelong crusade against the Washington establishment.
That crusade culminated 4 years later in the 1828 rematch. Guys, it was the dirtiest, most slanderous campaign in American history. Jackson won easily, but then terrible tragedy struck. On December 22nd, 1828, just weeks before his inauguration, his beloved wife Rachel died of a heart attack. Jackson blamed her death entirely on the vicious campaign attacks against her character by his political enemies. So he enters the White House as a grieving widower, harboring a deep, bitter resentment against his opponents. For our political biography, this is absolutely crucial. His grief literally became his ultimate political fuel.
Section 4. King Andrew I.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the Eaton affair during his presidency serves as the ultimate case study for us. Step 1. The Secretary of War's new wife, Peggy Eaton, is socially snubbed by the other cabinet wives over rumors about her past. Step 2. Jackson, deeply triggered by this, sees the exact same vicious persecution that he believes killed his wife Rachel. Step 3. He becomes convinced that his own vice president, John C. Calhoun, is the mastermind behind this social snubbing just to undermine his administration. Step 4. The result? Jackson literally purges his entire cabinet over a Washington society scandal. For Jackson, politics was never just business. It was always fiercely personal.
We see this intense personal will flare up again during the nullification crisis. South Carolina, led by that same Vice President John C. Calhoun, declared they could just nullify federal tariffs they didn't like, actively threatening to tear the country apart. Jackson's response? He stared Calhoun down at a dinner and delivered this chilling toast. Our federal union, it must be preserved. Behind the scenes, he was threatening to march an army into South Carolina and hang Calhoun for treason. His fierce patriotism meant he would hold the country together by sheer force if he had to.
But his most defining battle was against the Second Bank of the United States. When he vetoed the bank's recharter, he released a message that changed American political rhetoric forever. He wrote, "It is to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the acts of government to their selfish purposes." Jackson brilliantly framed the government as a neutral arbiter whose sworn duty was to protect the humble farmers and mechanics from the privileged elite. He wasn't just vetoing a bank. He was officially declaring class warfare on behalf of the common man.
Jackson's actions were so polarizing, they practically ripped the political landscape in two. On one side, his fierce allies galvanized into the Democratic Party, rallying around the common man. On the other side, everyone who hated him, Southern nullifiers, Northern bankers, supporters of Henry Clay, united into a brand new opposition. They called themselves the Whigs, and they deliberately borrowed that term from opponents of royal tyranny, because they viewed Jackson not as a president, but as a monarch. And honestly, you can kind of understand why his enemies called him a king. Jackson radically expanded executive power. He inaugurated the partisan spoils system, tossing out experienced bureaucrats for his own loyalists. He vetoed 12 bills. That's more than all 6 of his predecessors combined. He defied Congress, reshuffled his cabinet whenever they wouldn't obey his direct orders, and most controversially, he essentially ignored the Supreme Court. He completely transformed the presidency from a mild administrative role into a powerful, popular tribune ruling with an iron fist.
Now, that absolute refusal to be checked by the courts or Congress had truly devastating human consequences, most notably with the Indian Removal Act. Despite the Supreme Court ruling in favor of native sovereignty, Jackson aggressively pushed for the removal of tribes to the west. This eyewitness quote from soldier John G. Burnett captures the tragic historical reality: dragged from their homes and driven at the bayonet point into the stockades. This policy led directly to the horrors of the Trail of Tears. It is a permanent dark stain on Jackson's record, illustrating the brutal human cost of his unyielding vision.
Section 5. The Jacksonian Legacy. So, the crucial point is, what was the lasting imprint of the Age of Jackson? Upon retiring to his plantation, the Hermitage, he remained the dominant figure in American life. His 8 years in office radically redefined the democratic process itself. He birthed the durable national two-party system we still recognize today. He pioneered modern, popular political campaigning. Amazingly, he is the only president to have completely extinguished the national debt. But above all else, he solidified the president's role as the singular, direct voice of the American people, entirely independent of Congress.
Which leaves us exactly where we started, looking at the two very different faces of Andrew Jackson. Was he a shining symbol of American democracy, the self-made orphan who empowered the common citizen? Or was he an incipient tyrant, the American Caesar, who trampled over the courts, Congress, and vulnerable populations just to enforce his own will? It's a highly complex, unresolved paradox that historians are still fiercely debating today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning history, and I'll catch you next time.